bryophytes, that is Polytrichum. Okay, so this Polytrichum, as the name itself implies, trichum. Trichum means the hair-like structures, or we can call it as the leaf-like structures also here. The leaves will be in the form of small leaves. You can see here. Okay, poly, many. So this is considered as a true moss plant. Okay, so this is a plant commonly called as the moss, M-O-S-S, moss plant. Okay, so bryophytes are commonly called as the mosses. So that is the name given after the Polytrichum genera. So we'll go with the systematic position here. So it belongs to the kingdom Plantae. So you can see here the mosses. So Polytrichum is considered as the one of the moss plant. So Plantae, it belongs to the phylum Bryophyta. The class Polytrichopsida, this is according to the new classification, but we call it as the Bryopsida. Okay, it belongs to the class Bryopsida or Bryidae, one and the same. Order Polytrichales, Polytrichaceae, genus Polytrichum, and the species. Okay, so this plant, Polytrichum bryophyte plant, is considered as the true moss plant. So why we are calling it as the true moss plant? Because these are the first land plants to be evolved, showing some conducting tissues or conducting strand in them. They have they show the resemblances of the first vascular plant, the pteridophytes. Okay, so they are evolving. These are the evolving plants with the vascular tissue. So they possess, we are considering the Polytrichum plant as a miniature plant. Miniature means a very small plant. Okay, so which this plant is going to have leaf-like structures for photosynthesis. We call them as phylloids, root-like structures called as hydroids, and stem-like structure called as leptoid, or we call it as a receptacle. Now, so we go with the structure of the plant here. So when we talk about the occurrence, so this is a miniature Polytrichum plant. You can see here the gametophyte. This is a gametophyte plant. It just resembling just like a small plant which was emerged from a seed. Seed lo nunchi manaku chinna plant ela kanpadutundo vachinappudu, it appears just like that. So that's why we're calling it as a miniature plant. So we go for the occurrence of the Polytrichum. It is worldwide in distribution. That means we can see it everywhere. So they are very common in cool temperature and tropical regions. And also they are common point of the bryophyte, that is they grow in the shady places. Now when we talk about the structure of the Polytrichum plant, so here also the plant body is referred to as gametophyte, as it is going to develop the sexual organs. Now, so this adult plant, I can separate it or I can divide it into mainly the two parts, which is called as the upper rhizome. This is the rhizome part and the upright leafy shoot. So the basal, rhizome. What do you mean by the rhizome? Okay, so the part of the plant which grows underground the soil. I repeat, the part of the plant which is growing underground the soil and growing horizontally. So that part we are calling it as the rhizome. Okay, right. So from that we can see the emerging out some small colorless leaves, and it also bears some small root-like structures, what we call them as rhizoids. Okay, and these cells or these rhizoids or this rhizome help in the conduction of the water and the minerals for this upright shoot. Now the next part of this gametophyte, it is called as the the leafy shoot area or the stem-like structure, where we can see the many number of leaves arising from this rhizome. So it's going to consist of a central axis, a stem. It is not a true stem. We just call it as a central axis. So on the central axis, you can see the many leaf-like structures. I repeat, from the rhizome, a central axis will emerge. So from this central axis, many leaf-like structures, we call them as phylloids rather to say. Okay, they are not the true leaves, but they are appearing just like a leaf-like structure. So we can also call them as the leaves or leaflets or phylloids. Now, so how are these leaves on the central axis? They are arranged spirally. Spirally means throughout. And central axis undi kada, dan chuttooru manaki leaves arrange ayinattuga kanpadtayi. Okay. So these are the, this is the structure of the upright leafy shoot region of the gametophyte. Now, when we talk about the leaf-like structures here, they are very, very small. So when we talk about the structure of them, so they are, so we can see the leaves here representing green in color, but the lower ones, they are brown or colorless as they are the part of the rhizome, but the upright leafy shoot area possesses green color leaves, and they are sessile. That means they don't have any petiole-like structure, so we call them as the sessile. And at the base of the leaf is broad, and it is not narrow, it is very broad, by which it is attached to the central axis or the stem-like region. Now, next, each leaf you can see the presence of a midrib, that is just like a midvein of a leaf. We can see that presence of a midrib region, and the complete photosynthetic region of the leaf, which consists of the chloroplast, gradually made up of green lamellae, we call it as. We'll see the internal structure performing the photosynthesis. So this is a brief description about the gametophyte of the Polytrichum. Okay, it is having a rhizome, rhizoids, central midrib, central axis. Around the central axis, we can see the leaves which are arranged spirally. When we talk about the leaves are sessile. They are lanceolate in shape. When we talk about the lanceolate leaf ante grass ela untadamma, grass leaf podugga, the leaves will be like this. The shape of the leaf will be lanceolate. This is like this, broad at the base and pointed at the tip region.
Lanceolate means బల్లెం ఆకారంలో ఉండేటువంటి పత్రాలు అన్నమాట. బల్లెం ఆకారంలో అంటే పత్రాల యొక్క శీర్ష భాగము చూడడానికి ఒక బల్లెం మాదిరిగా ఉంటాయి అన్నమాట. వీటిని లాన్సియోలేట్ లీవ్స్ అంటారు. ఓకే మేడం, ప్లీజ్ కంటిన్యూ.
Yes sir. So this is the shape of the leaf. So with the help of this broad base, they are attached to the central axis. So inkoka point, one more point I want to tell you here is, when we go to the tip of the central axis, you can see here all the leaves at the tip, that is at the point, the top of the central axis, the leaves are arranged in a rosette manner or in the just like a cluster we can see here. And anni leaves oka chota ila gumpuga unnattuga kanpadutundi. This is called as the head region. So that I'll tell you in the next coming slide. Now, so we'll go with the internal structure now. So this is regarding the external part of the gametophyte. And one more point. So let me continue here with this cluster. So the cluster of the leaves, whatever there on the top of the central main axis, the main reason for that is, in this cluster, you can see the accommodation of the sexual organs. అందుకని ఈ ప్లాంట్ ని మనం gametophyte అన్నాం. ఇక్కడ we can see the plant. Now I can call this as a plant. No more a thallus. I can call now this as a plant body. Okay, so the plant body I'm calling it as a gametophyte. Why I'm calling it as a gametophyte? Because in this cluster of the leaves at the top of the central main axis, we can see the development of sexual organs. And another important point here is the Polytrichum plant body is a dioecious thallus. Once again, just like Markantia, it is dioecious. That means to say male plant is separate and the female plant is separate. Now, in the male plant, the top of the central male axis, it shows that is in this cluster, we can see the development of male sexual organ that is called as the antheridia. So I can call this as an antheridial cluster or as an antheridial head. So when we go for the female, it is called as the archegonia. The female sexual organ is archegonia. So this cluster, I mean call it as archegonial cluster or the archegonial head. Okay, so that is the reason the plant body is represented as the gametophyte. Next, so from this gametophyte, after the reproduction, there it emerges the long elongated sporophyte region. So that when we talk regarding the reproduction, I'll tell you that. So now this is the external morphology of the Polytrichum plant. Now we'll go for the internal structure, that is the anatomy. We'll go one after the other. That is the internal morphology. First, we'll study about the rhizome. So already we discussed that the plant body is differentiated into the rhizome, the central main axis or the stem, and the leaves. So prati oka dani oka internal structure chadvali, that is very important. Okay, now so the anatomy of the rhizome or the internal structure of the rhizome here, it is roughly a triangular in shape. When we talk about the, easily we can identify the transverse section. When you take the TS of the rhizome, it appears just like a triangular in shape or triangular in outline with rounded corners. Now, so we talk about the, when we take the TS, it is divided into 3 regions. The first region is considered as the epidermal region. Second region is called as the cortex. And the third region is called as the central cylinder. So first you have to talk about the epidermis, transverse section of the rhizome or the anatomy of the rhizome of a Polytrichum is divided into 3 regions: epidermis, cortex, and this is the central region or the central cylinder. Now, what is the, how is the epidermis here? Always we all know that epidermis becomes the outermost layer of any plant part, and this is very thick walled as it is staying. This rhizome will be staying inside the soil, okay, to protect the internal tissues. So this epidermal will become a thick walled. From this epidermis, you can see the development of the unicellular rhizoids. So these are the rhizoids which are emerging out from the epidermal cells, useful for fixing the plant into the soil. Now next we'll go for the next layer of the rhizome, that we call it as the cortex region or the cortical region. Now this cortex is around 3 to 4 layered. Epidermis nunchi central cylinder varaku దీని యొక్క ఎన్ని వరుసలు ఉన్నాయంటే about 3 to 4 layered. And all these cells, the cortical cells or the cortex cells, they are thin walled. They are not thick, they are very much thin walled. Okay, now so this cortex at certain regions, it is having, you can see thick regions మీకు కనపడుతున్నాయి. cortex లోనే అక్కడ 3 regions లో మీకు ఇక్కడ థిక్గా సెల్స్ చాలా థిక్గా ఉన్నట్టు కనబడుతున్నాయి. దీస్ ఆర్ కాల్డ్ యాజ్ hypodermal strands. I repeat, these are called as the hypodermal strands, which are coming from the epidermis and extending towards the central cylinder. So we can see the presence of 3 hypodermal strands in the cortex region. Now, what are these hypodermal strands? Hypodermis is always related to the providing mechanical strength. Ante plant body ki ee rhizome region ki strength, mechanical support ivvadaniki some of the cortical cells in this rhizome is surrounded by a very thick layer which are called as suberin. Okay, it becomes very thick and transforms into hypodermis. Okay, so the main function of this is to provide the mechanical strength. Now cortex region anta kuda it almost helping in storing of the food material. Now next region is the most important region, that is the central region of the rhizome. Now how is the central region? The central cylinder here, it is surrounded by the 2 to 3 layered of a pericycle. Okay, and this central cylinder is again a 3-lobed alternating with the furrows. So ikkada enti ee 3 rows ante, first row we are calling it as the hydrome. So I can just show you here. This is the first row which is called as the hydrome. Second row we are calling it as the leptome, and the third region we are calling it as the amylum. What is this hydrome leptome? So that is referred to the tissues just like the xylem and the phloem of the higher vascular plants. Manaki xylem or phloem, what are they called as? They are the vascular tissues. They are the conducting strands, we can call them as. So what is the use of a xylem tissue, Amma? Anybody? Xylem tissue role enti plant body lo?
వాటర్ని ట్రాన్స్పోర్ట్ చేస్తుంది.
Very good. So xylem tissue helps in conducting of the water. Very good. Leptome and మన phloem amma,
ఫుడ్ ని ట్రాన్స్పోర్ట్ చేస్తుంది.
okay, from the leaves through the phloem the food material is supplied to all the parts of the plant body. అంటే leaf నుంచి మనకి కింద root వరకు branches కి అన్ని parts కి phloem through మనకి food material supply అవుతుంది. అదే xylem అంటే మనకి roots నుంచి tip of the plant వరకు మనకి వాటర్ ని సప్లై చేస్తుంది. దే జస్ట్ యాక్ట్ లైక్ ఏ కండక్టింగ్ స్ట్రాండ్స్. సో అదే విధంగా ఈ బ్రయోఫైట్ లా కూడా దీస్ ఆర్ ది మోస్ట్ అడ్వాన్స్డ్, ఈ పాలిట్రైకమ్ అనేది అడ్వాన్స్డ్ బ్రయోఫైట్. అంటే వీటి తర్వాత ఇంకా ఎవల్యూషన్ లో మనకి నెక్స్ట్ వచ్చేవి వాస్కులర్ ప్లాంట్స్ అన్నమాట, టెరిడోఫైట్స్. సో స్లోలీ వీ కెన్ సీ ఇన్ ద స్ట్రక్చర్ some small development in the conducting strand. Okay, so what are these anedante? Hydrome, leptome. These are the tissues or the cells which are present in the rhizome helping in the conduction. So hydrome entante, this is the one which is helping in conducting of the water, whereas the leptome, it just act like the phloem conducting the food material. Tarada amylum region ఏంటంటే these are the innermost cells which are parenchymatous, which are storing the starch as the food material. ఎందుకు rhizome is a non green. rhizome లో మీకు ఎక్కడ కూడా మీకు ఫుడ్ మెటీరియల్ సప్లై అంటే ప్రిపేర్ చేయడానికి ఎక్కడ క్లోరోప్లాస్ట్ కనపడవు, కానీ ఇట్ రిక్వైర్స్ ఫుడ్ మెటీరియల్ టు గ్రో. సో amylum are the cells, the region where the parenchymatous cells are going to store the starch as the food material for its growth and development. Okay, so this central cylinder, it plays a very important role, and it makes as a taxonomic evidence. And enti ante manaki ee polytrichum ee lower most plants nunchi slowga vascular plants evolve అయ్యాయి అని చెప్పడానికి ఈ rhizome లో ఉన్న central cylinder కానీ stem లో ఉన్న central part it makes an evidence అన్నమాట. వీటి నుంచి మనకి land plants first vascular plants evolve అవ్వాయి అని చెప్పడానికి ఇది ఒక proof. Okay, now this is regarding the internal structure of the rhizome. Now we'll go with the internal structure of the stem, that is the central axis. Now, even the transverse section of the stem is also differentiated into 3 regions. Now, what we call it as the epidermal region, medulla, and the cortex. Okay, so now you can see here, and in the medulla, again here it is differentiated into 2 regions, that is the central region or the central zone and the peripheral region. So here also you can see the presence of the conducting strands, what we call it as the hydrome and the leptome. And apart from that, we can also see the innermost layer of the cortex. Is this the innermost layer of the cortex? Here it is going to be surrounded by the mantle around the conducting strand, that we call it as the mantle, which is also a parenchymatous tissue. So ikkada kuda meeku leptome region, okay, surrounding the hydrome, the central hydrome region, you can see this is a cortex, parenchymatous cortex, the outermost epidermal tissue, and leaf traces. Ikkada chudochu meeku ikkada ante those are the points from where the leaves are attached. So వీటిని మనము leaf traces అని అంటాం. Okay, 1 2 3 4 ఇక్కడ మీ cortical region లో these leaf traces you can be seen in the cortex. This is the central cylinder surrounding the
తెలుగులో వీటిని పత్రాను పతాలు అంటారు. లీఫ్ ట్రేసెస్ ని తెలుగులో ఏమంటామంటే పత్రాను పతాలు. ఈ పత్రాను పతాలు అనేటువంటివి మేఘల రూపంలో ఉంటాయి, గ్రిడిల్ రూపంలో ఉంటాయి అన్నమాట. ఈ పత్రాను పతాల నుంచే మనకు లీవ్స్ అనేటువంటివి ఏర్పడడానికి అవకాశం ఉండేటువంటి ప్రదేశాలు అన్నమాట. ఓకే మేడం, ప్లీజ్ కంటిన్యూ.
Yes sir. So this is regarding the stem, aerial stem, that is the transverse TS of the aerial stem. మనకి ఇంకా నెక్స్ట్ పార్ట్ ఏంటి? leaves. Okay, so the leaf structure. So ఇందాకే చెప్పాను కదా, how are these leaves? These are sessile. మీకు ఇక్కడ ఎటువంటి పిట్యూల్ కానీ మనకి స్టాక్ లాంటిది ఏమీ కనపడదు. So this is the structure of a leaf. You can see this is a lanceolate in shape. And another important point I told you that these leaves, they have a central midrib region. మనకి midwin ఎట్లా ఉంటుందో లీఫ్ లో అదే విధంగా సెంట్రల్ midrib region ఉంటుంది. And they are broad at the base. You can see here they are very broad at the base and tapering and pointed at the tip region. Okay, next we are generally naming them as the lamellae. Okay, they are also known as the lamellae, but leaves anlemo lamellae anochu or small leaflets anochu. So they perform the photosynthesis. So just like the higher plants, these leaves also they perform the photosynthesis. That's why they appear green in color at the topmost portion of the gametophyte. They are spirally arranged, and at the top we can see them forming a cluster, and we are calling them as the pericytial leaves. So I'll make a tarvata next slide lo cheptanu. Now we'll go for the transverse section. So ee leaf yokka transverse section ni observe cheste, so it has a very complex internal structure. So ikkada midrib region anedi very thick region. Okay, so at the margins, so when we go for the margin of the midrib, it becomes very thin. Now it is going to have the epidermal region, the lower epidermis, and 1 or 2 layers of the sclerenchyma you can see at the lower epidermal tissue. That is above the epidermal tissue, you can see 1 or 2, 3 layers of the sclerenchyma. But whereas the central tissue, this is the central tissue of the leaf, which is parenchymatous and thin walled. Now, above this parenchymatous tissue, you can see a many large number of cells which are arranged one above the other like this. Idanta lower epidermis. లోవర్ parenchymatous tissue కనపడుతుంది. దానిపైన మీకు థిన్ వాల్డ్ parenchymatous tissue. ఇంకా లోపలికి వెళ్తే this becomes the central tissue. ఈ సెంట్రల్ టిష్యూ ఏంటి? ఇక్కడ సెల్స్ అన్ని కూడా లీనియర్ ఫ్యాషన్ లో మనకి సెల్స్ అన్ని కూడా వన్ అబౌవ్ ది అదర్ ఇట్లా పొడుగ్గా ఉన్నట్టుగా కనపడతాయి. Now what are these? These are called as lamella or the lamellae cells. Now what is this? This is the region where all the cells ikkada meeku manchi green color la kanpadutunnayi cells anni kuda. That means to say these are the one where which consists of chloroplast and chlorophyll pigment performing the photosynthesis in this particular region. So hence we are calling this region as the photosynthetic region of the leaf. Inka terminal part ki velte ee lamellae part terminal part ki velte slowly they become colorless and they are just acting like the terminal cells. Ante manaki leaf chivari bhagam anamata. Idantha middle region. Thick ga untundi middle region. Idantha lower part of the leaf. Clear? So this is regarding the internal structure or the anatomy of rhizome and stem and the leaf structure. So now we'll go with the reproduction point of view. So this ends with our gametophyte external morphology and the internal morphology. Now next we'll go for the reproduction, how the plants are undergoing reproduction. So just like the previous genera, even Polytrichum is also undergoing vegetative reproduction by the following methods. One is called as, so first we'll go with the fragmentation and then is the protonema. So fragmentation enti ikkada? Fragmentation ante ikkada entante the rhizome, okay, which is giving rise to the leaf and the shoot. ఈ rhizome ఎప్పుడైతే it will breaking down into small pieces due to any unfavorable conditions or ఎప్పుడైతే అది break అవుతుందో it has a capacity to develop into the erect leaf and the, that is the shoot, the central axis and the leaves. So that is the fragmentation. So next is the protonema. So ఇది చాలా important point ఇక్కడ ఏంటి అంటే, సో ఇప్పటివరకు మీకు protonema అనేది కనపడదు. So this is the first plant to develop the protonemal stage, just like the first vascular plants. మనకి protonema అనేది vascular plant అంటే pteridophytes నుంచి కనపడుతుంది. సో ఇది కూడా ఒక ఎవిడెన్స్ అన్నమాట, మనకి pteridophytes bryophytes నుంచి ఇవాల్వ్ అయ్యాయని చెప్పడానికి this formation of protonema is also one of the evidence. So what is this protonema? So protonema is just a small, we can also call it as a juvenile stage. Juvenile stage అంటే first formed plant అన్నమాట. ఓకే, సో జనరల్ గా మనకి మార్కాన్షాలో ఆంథోసిరోస్ లో ఏం చెప్పాము, స్పోర్ నుంచి డైరెక్ట్ గా మనకి కొత్త థాలస్ అనేది ఏర్పడుతుంది. కానీ Polytrichum లో spores are going to germinate and it is going to form a juvenile stage or a filamentous plant body. Filamentous అంటే ఇక్కడ మళ్ళీ మీకు ఆల్గేలోకి వెళ్ళొచ్చు. మీరు ఆల్గేలో ఎక్టోకార్పస్ కానివ్వండి ఆర్ నెక్స్ట్ ఏం చదువుతారు మీరు, పాలీసైఫోనియాలో మనకి ప్లాంట్ బాడీ ఎట్లా ఉంది, ఫిలమెంటస్. అదే విధంగా ఈ protonema కూడా just appear like that, multicellular branched filamentous structure. ఈ protonema లో we can see several buds. Buds అంటే ఎప్పుడు కూడా these are the small structures having the capacity to divide. So ఈ protonema లో they consist of several buds. So each bud will develop into a gametophytic plant body. Okay, they are represented as the vegetative buds. So this plays a very important role in the life cycle. Spore నుంచి Polytrichum లో ఎప్పుడు కూడా మీకు ఒక కొత్త ప్లాంట్ అనేది, న్యూ ప్లాంట్ అనేది ఇట్ ఆల్వేస్ ఫార్మ్స్ ఫ్రమ్ ది ప్రోటోనిమల్ స్టేజ్ ఓన్లీ. ఇది మీకు బ్రయోఫైటాలో ఇంకెక్కడ కనపడదు. ఓన్లీ ఇన్ ది హయ్యర్ బ్రయోఫైట్, దట్ ఈస్ ద బ్రయోఫిటిక్ ప్లాంట్ బిలాంగింగ్ టు ది బ్రయోప్సిడా, వీటిలోనే మీకు ఈ స్టేజ్ అనేది కనపడుతుంది. సార్ ఎనీ మోర్ ఎక్స్ప్లెనేషన్ రిగార్డింగ్ దిస్? మీ లైక్ తెలుగు లాంగ్వేజ్ లో ఏమైనా చెప్పగలుగుతారా?
ఎస్ మేడం. ఈ ప్రోటోనిమల్ తెలుగులో ప్రథమ తంతువు అని పిలుస్తామా. ప్రథమ తంతువు సాధారణంగా శాఖీయ ప్రత్యుత్పత్తి అనేటువంటిది ఇక్కడ మనకు పాలిట్రైకంలో ప్రథమ తంతువు ద్వారా, అదేవిధంగా ముక్కలుగా విరగడం ద్వారా, థాలస్ లేదా తంతువులు ఇవి ముక్కలుగా విరగడం ద్వారా మనకు శాఖీయ ప్రత్యుత్పత్తి అనేటువంటి జరుగుతుంది. ఇక్కడ ఈ ప్రోటోనియం అనేటువంటిది సాధారణంగా మనకు చిన్న చిన్న శాఖీయ మొగ్గలు, వెజిటేటివ్ బర్డ్స్ శాఖీయ మొగ్గలు కలిగి ఉండి, అవి ఎప్పుడైతే అనుకూల పరిస్థితులు ఏర్పడతాయో, ఫేవరబుల్ కండిషన్స్ ఏర్పడతాయో, అనుకూల పరిస్థితుల్లో అవి వేళ్ళను ఏర్పరచుకొని, అంటే మూలతంతువులు ఏర్పరచుకొని, రైజాయిడ్స్ ఏర్పరచుకొని ఆ మొగ్గలు అనేటువంటివి కొత్త పాలిట్రైకం మొక్కను ఏర్పరుస్తాయి. అదేవిధంగా ముక్కలుగా విరిగేటువంటి విధానం ద్వారా, అంటే ఫ్రాగ్మెంటేషన్ జరిగేటువంటి విధానం ద్వారా సాధారణంగా ఈ కొమ్ము, అంటే మనము ఈ ఇందులో కాండం అనేటువంటిది 2 రూపాలుగా ఉంటుందని చెప్పుకున్నాం. మేడం గారు ఏమని చెప్పారు? రైజోమ్ అంటే భూగర్భయుత కొమ్ము, అదేవిధంగా వాయుగత కాండం రూపంలో ఉంటుంది. ఈ భూగర్భయుత కొమ్ములో కొన్ని భాగాలు అది మానవుని చర్యల వల్ల కానీ, లేదా అవి కొద్ది భాగం చనిపోవడం వల్ల కానీ అవి విడిపోయి మళ్ళీ అవి అనుకూల పరిస్థితులు ఏర్పరిచినప్పుడు నూతన శాఖలు లేదా కొత్త మొక్కలు ఏర్పరిచేటువంటి విధానాన్ని మనం ఇక్కడ చూడవచ్చు. ఇవి తంతువులు ముక్కలుగా ప్రథమ తంతువు ద్వారా, అదేవిధంగా ఈ కొమ్ము ముక్కలుగా విరగడం ద్వారా లేదా కొద్ది భాగం చనిపోవడం వల్ల కొత్త మొక్కలు ఏర్పడేటువంటి విధానం ఫ్రాగ్మెంటేషన్. ఓకే మేడం, ప్లీజ్ కంటిన్యూ.
ఓకే సార్. సో నెక్స్ట్ విల్ గో విత్ ది సెక్షువల్ రిప్రొడక్షన్. సార్ ఇక్కడ నేను స్టార్ట్ చేయాలా? ఇది కంటిన్యూ చేస్తే మళ్ళీ కంటిన్యూషన్ ఉంటుంది.
yes madam, yes madam, I will continue.
ఓకే సార్.